Hello. It's January 10, 2023. It's a SIG Node weekly meeting. Hello, everybody. We have mid-size agenda today. So let's start with first agenda item. It's Raven and Paco.
Okay. Hi, all. Paco and I were working on this cap to propose to add a kubelet level limit of parallel image pools. The cap link is here. We are just asking for people to review it. The idea is quite simple. We're just trying to add a kubelet configuration to put a limit on the maximum number of images that can be pulled in parallel, and all image pools beyond that limit will be blocked until one of the image pools finishes. Yeah, more details and user experience can be found in this cap, so just please review it. And also, because this change and this idea is quite simple, we're not sure if it really warrants a cap, or we can just go implement it. So if you don't think it warrants a cap, please let us know so that we can, make the process simpler. Yeah, that's all about it.
I think we should have a cap for it, even though this is simple.
Okay.
Yeah.
This will be a new flag, so it wouldn't change current behavior, right?
Right. So there will be a new flag, and the behavior will only be changed if a user explicitly sets that flag to something like max parallel pool equals to some non-zero value.
Makes sense.
I think we should definitely have like an issue and maybe some public discussions, but I'm not sure if this really warrants the cap. It's not making any like API changes that would need to progress through feature stages. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm also saying it might be a bit overkill for this.
Right. I think a cap is actually okay to me, but what might be an overkill is the alpha, beta, and stable phases. Yeah, I'm thinking just even if we do have a cap here, maybe we can skip some of the phases. Like we go directly to like a stable stage, because this is just a new configuration, right? We are not changing any default behavior. So yeah, that is something we can discuss over the cap as well.
Yeah, I think the only concern here, maybe potential issue is noisy neighbors when you run too many image pools simultaneously, and how it may affect it. Just think through this scenario. So
right,
you can go alpha and GA without beta. It also may be fine.
Okay.
Any more comments on that? Okay, let's move on. Kevin?
Yeah, I just had a really quick, I guess more of a question than anything else. One of the things we discussed in the dynamic resource allocation cap is an extension to the CRI to include the addition of CDI devices. We opted not to do that in the initial version and rely on annotations to pass CDI devices through Kubernetes down into the container runtime. But it's always been the plan to eventually extend the CRI and promote this a field for actually passing the CDI devices down, so it's not just some opaque thing passing through a set of annotations. And we opted not to do it in the previous release because we, as part of the alpha feature, because we want to make sure this was actually something that was going to make it in before we, modified CRI. But now that it's in for alpha, we want to actually make this addition to CRI, and then obviously eventually update the container runtimes to know how to consume it properly. And my main question around it was, because it's such a small change and it's something we already talked about in the DRA cap, or we glossed over it. We don't have the details of what the change would actually be. My question is whether we should just update the DRA cap with these new details now that we have a better understanding of how we want to add it, or does this warrant an actual full-on cap just to make this CRI addition?
I think an update is fine, Kevin. I added a comment there. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, then that answers the question. I just wanted to make sure it was discussed and documented, so when we go and do that, everyone knows why we did it that way.
Does it go into this discussion about how much kubelet needs to know about everything and how much runtime needs to know about it. I think it's something we discussed in as a group that talking about topology and CPU manager being external plugins and how much they will know about everything and how much kubelet will know about everything.
So what's the question here? Sorry.
I'm just making a comment that it comes back to this discussion about how much kubelet needs to know and pass to runtime and how much runtime will need to know it itself.
Sergey, it's exactly the same information what DRA plugin reports to kubelet. So right now it's passed just as annotation towards the runtime, and we are promoting it to a normal field, like nothing more than that.
Okay. Okay. So there's no special logic in kubelet processing these fields.
No, it's just a cleanup of annotation and use the normal field.
Yeah, it's promoting it to an actual field rather than, abusing annotations to pass the information down the stack.
Cool. Thank you. Next up is Quentin.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe I can share my screen. Oh, I can't. Okay. So my proposition is an issue that you can see on the docs. So sometimes you have a cron job that you run each week, for example, that needs to claim a GWT, but the GWT is only valid like 10 minutes, for example, and you need to get this environment variable before running the container, because the container is not something you build yourself, but it's a third-party app or things like that. So you use the default init container, and at the end you will always end up like sourcing a file before applying a non-3-point script, which you need to know what is this entry-point script, and when it's some third-party apps, it can be hard to set and maintain. So my proposition is to add a file key selector on source, file on source, like the config map ref key on the secret ref or things like that. So you can tell Kubernetes when you start this container, before running it, go to the file system, get this file, and add all this environment before running the entry point. So you don't need to modify the entry point of this app. So basically, this is my proposition.
Yeah, I see on the issues there is some discussion. Can you summarize what? It's who is Fruitbox?
So
I just cannot read it that fast. So if there are some comments already that people were making from SIG apps, it would be great. You can voice some.
So yes, so I presented it in the SIG apps, and they say go to the SIG Node meeting. We cannot give you a lot of information on that. That's all. I've read the code, and I think there is I've linked the part of the code I think I need to modify, so it's in the SIG Node part. So yes, that's all.
Would it be possible to leverage empty DIRs for this use case? So rather than have an arbitrary file ref, we could couple it to the file being stored in an empty dir. and then referencing a key within a named empty dir on the pod spec.
Sorry, I don't understand. Can you repeat?
So today, when you create a pod, you can source environment variables from excuse me, field references, resources, config maps, or secrets, right? That might be referenced by that pod.
Yes.
And you're proposing a new reference location, which would be just an arbitrary file path. What I was wondering was if there's a benefit to not making an arbitrary file path, but making it an empty dir file path reference. So I don't know if you're familiar with empty directories that you can declare in your pod spec, but if you had a use case where your init container had to write something and it had to be shared with the primary container, you could make that write in an empty dir, which you declare in your pod spec, and then we could have it that your mvar values are sourced from a location in that empty directory.
Yeah,
So I think it's like the same concept. It just would say that you should use empty dirs as the location to read the secret or the mvars from, rather than like an arbitrary path in the.
Okay, so not an arbitrary path, but like volumes or to reference more complex path, if I understand right.
Derek, are you trying to minimize the surface of this enhancement, so you don't have some external volume with a bunch of environment variables that attach to everything?
Right, or you don't necessarily have to reference a path that might be in the container itself, right? Or on the container writable layer, because that's not going to be shared across containers anyway. So just like the convention could be to reference the path from a location in an empty directory. And then from a modeling standpoint, we already have like an empty dir volume source. So I don't know, it felt like it could be similar.
Okay.
Yeah, we can have a standard file under a config map, right? A /env or something where we can read it from if it's populated.
But the concept makes sense. I was just trying to think through like, rather than select a file inside the container, because in your use case, you said you were sourcing containers from third parties, and might mean that you're not able to write in that container, versus sourcing the file from a separate directory that is shared with the pod lifetime, which would be an empty dir. Felt like it made good sense for you.
Yes, but sometimes, for example, Vault. So the example I take in sources in the end of the first comment is the first source is the Vault implementation of say, so when you want to add the environment variable from Vault, it creates an init container, but you don't see it when you create your deployment. Then at the end you can add your proper image. So I think it's the most common use case of environment variable generated on the fly. So you create your own pod, your own container, but some third-party apps create init containers that create some files for you. And sometimes in this file you have some environment variable that you want to source, but you don't know what is the volume which is mounted. The only thing that is always documented is where it is mounted in your file system at the end. So I don't know, but you can propose anything. I'm not. I've not used Kubernetes a lot, so you can. You can.
Yeah, I wonder is there maybe some security considerations when you reference a random file, so you can put some file that is secret of any sort to be a environment variable somehow.
Yeah, so I guess recommendation for like a next path is like, it makes sense to me that we might want to explore allowing you to source an environment variable from a different location than the set that we have today. And since this is a pod API change, it has to go through a KEP process. And so if this is your first interaction with Kubernetes in that regard, it's a organizational process we follow that says this is the change, this is how the change will be implemented. So a lot of what you wrote in the issue would have to get moved into a KEP and then tracked in an enhancement. But I think generally I would be supportive of improving the set of locations we can source an environment variable from. The empty dir was just one convention we have today for other like volume sources. So maybe in a KEP, which would be a next step, we could weigh out the pros and cons of approaches. But I don't know, to me, generally, this seems like a sensible idea at first blush, but like, we'll just have to do the following work to hash out the design.
Yes. Another question is what will be the comportment of Kubernetes if the file that I referenced does not exist or is not an environment variable?
Could you repeat that? I didn't.
If the file that I source is a Python script, for example, what must be the comportment of the? It must not start the pod, I think, but that's a question I think we need to add in the note.
Yeah, so there might be error conditions we'd have to work through in the KEP. I guess if there's a next step, I think I'd encourage you to write something up that explores those spaces, and then maybe in that write-up explore if you think referencing mvars from an empty dir is palatable to your use case or not, and maybe some pros and cons on that. But that's already today a kubelet managed directory with the life cycle of the pod, and so and is distinct from any individual container needing to be put in your pod, that there just could be benefits for you to explore that as an option. So I'm not sure much more to add on that, I guess, other than, yeah, please write a KEP and explore the ideas. And if anyone else wants to help explore that with you, like, please chime up now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have an action item here and lots of comments. Next, maybe we can go with Vinay first and then Derek. Vinay, do you want an update on in-place product scaling?
Scott says he won't be here today.
Oh, he's not here. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking through the status really quickly, and yeah, review is still needed. I wonder if API was merged. Oh, Tim has objection with that. Derek, what do you think about merging API first? I know you wanted to do it last time. Do you want to push for that, or we want to combine PRs?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't caught up on Tim's comments. I mean, I pushed Tim to merge the API change, so I'll have to see what his objection was.
Okay.
It looks like he has a number of code requests in the smaller API, so I don't know. I have to work out on that.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go to SIG updates.
Yeah, so just wanted to give an update on some things that Dawn and I have been batting around through much of 2022. So for the life of SIG Node, for those who don't know, Dawn and I have both been chair and technical leads. It's been a lot of work, but it's been very rewarding, and hopefully people feel like we've done a decent enough job shepherding the area. You might have noticed over the last year that other folks in the SIG had been taking more prominent roles in leading meetings and helping guide release planning. And that was because Dawn and I had both been trying to find ways to support growth of folks in the SIG, and ideally split the SIG Node chair and tech lead roles into separate roles rather than today they're combined. So folks who might not be aware with Kubernetes governance, there's a concept of a SIG chair, and they tend to run the operations of the SIG, a lot of the release planning activities, milestone labeling, our commitments out to the broader community with respect to, health of SIG reporting, that type of thing. And then there's the concept of a technical lead role, which is basically intending to do what could be considered by some folks the fun stuff of like helping figure out what we build and how we build it, and the sub projects we sponsor or don't sponsor, that type of thing. Right now, SIG Node for the life of the SIG has combined both those roles into both Dawn and myself, but it's a lot of work and takes a lot of time, and it's probably something that the SIG can benefit by separating apart. And so many other SIGs have distinguished the two roles, and what we wanted to do in 2023, just kick off the year, particularly before the 127 release, is act on some of the 126 release feedback we did in our retro. And so Dawn's not here today, but we'll send a note out afterwards. We were proposing to split both the chair and tech lead roles. And the chair role suggests 2 to 3 people hold the role. Dawn and I wanted to nominate both Mernal and Sergey to hold chair roles, recognizing the work that everyone here has been for the last year, seen them helping coordinate release planning and general operations of the SIG. And close out on one of our 126 retro items, which was make sure that as we do 127, we can better scale our milestone planning and stuff. So if there's no objection to that proposal, what you'll see is a note gets sent to the SIG Node mailing list asking for feedback. But I think for myself, I'd like to thank both Mernal and Sergey for their work in the past year. And hopefully the rest of the community would endorse them taking on this new responsibility. As for the SIG tech lead roles, both Dawn and myself wanted to maintain that role, but we also wanted to scale it. And so many folks may have known that Mernal has been very active in SIG Node for the last 2 years. And so we wanted to extend to him the SIG tech lead role as well. So we would have 3 people filling the role. Mernal has been a sub-project approver in the kubelet for the last 2 years. He ran the cryo project when it was a sub-project sponsored by the SIG. Has been very active in OCI, CRI, container spaces. And so we wanted to start the new year by recognizing that and recommending him to help join us in the tech lead capacity. So with that, I wanted to thank Mernal for the last many years of engagement in Kubernetes, and thank him for that. If there is any objections, any of these changes, like I said, there'll be a note that gets sent out into the SIG mailing list. But hopefully everyone can support folks being successful in these new capacities. We want to make these changes before the 127 release planning is complete. I don't think there's any impact in our present charter. I don't think there's any impact on any of our sub-project ownership structures or stuff like that, but we think it would set us up for a good 2023. And so thought about doing this last week, but we had a lighter attendance. So this week is a good week to do it. So that was the update I wanted to make. Like I said, I'll send a note out this afternoon with the details, but a big thank you to Mernal and Sergey and everyone else who participates in the SIG, and I look forward to better scaling in 2023. And that's all I had.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Yeah, happy to continue supporting SIG Node and Kubernetes. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and helping out. Is there any other comments? Any other agenda items? I think next week we may come back to cap planning and reiterate again on what caps will be scaled for this release. We still have a few weeks left, so don't be alarmed that we will discuss it next week. But if you have something you're working on already, please make sure that this is spec'd out in our document, and we will include it into our release. Thank you.
I have a quick question about the separation between the chair and the tech leads in terms of who has the ability to approve things across the various repos, and is there an alias for the owners in owners files for tech leads versus chairs? Maybe I just haven't
great
paid attention
question.
because I'm mostly involved with SIG Node, but is there a tech leads alias or no?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the note I'll send out, I'll link to the two things that describe the roles and responsibilities. I just threw it in the chat now. The approval of new sub-projects is the capacity of the tech lead. Things like milestone labeling, just release planning, some of that stuff is in the chair role. But you can see those two links and follow through what the individual responsibilities are. The chair is a far more operational role, and the tech lead role is more domain. Kevin, hopefully if you click through those things, you'll see the distinctions.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think I was more curious though, just about, right now there's an alias in the various owners files for SIG Node leads that needs to approve things. And will there now be a SIG Node tech leads for certain owners files that will then replace the SIG Node leads?
So so I think
question?
where we use SIG Node leads now, we need to distinguish that from maybe a given sub-project leads. So I think it's possible that where we have SIG Node leads now, depending on where it's referenced, it should be Kubernetes, or I'm sorry, kubelet sub-project leads, right? We might have to work that out. We're not intending to change anything around owner files rights today, like let's say on the kubelet, if that makes sense. It shouldn't have any impact on that. The only impact I would see on this is that Sergey and Mernal would both have milestone labeling rights, and Mernal would have privileges to approve requests for new sub-projects.
What about caps? Responsible for caps?
Caps are still tied to a particular sub-project, so it would depend on the sub-project that they have an issue with. So
champion.
But these are basically governance roles within operation of the project, but not necessarily, like I said, right now we're not tackling the individual owners files. I will say right now there is a goal of mine personally, and I know Dawn, to add and scale new approvers, both at the qubit level and the enhancement levels. And last year we wrote the membership ladder discussion on that. Kevin, you recall that? So we're not making any changes on that. But I will say right now, like if folks want to move up on that ladder, please reach out so we can help nurture that desire, right? But for what's being described here, like there's a lot of background work, Kevin, and just being the chair, like getting the YouTube videos uploaded, having access to that playlist, a lot of stuff that actually ends up taking a fair bit of time, and that's what you'll see in some of these chair versus tech lead things for folks who haven't seen it for governance.
No, that makes sense. I think what I've found in the past is that, you know, a lot of times I'll do a review for something and that requires a SIG node lead approval, and it's not just enough to be, you know, in the owner's file for the kubelet. And it'll reach this point where it's mostly ready, and then I'm blocked on actually getting either you or Dawn, in the past at least, to take a look at it and approve it. And so this is where I'm just curious if there's some way to scale out that role that can do that final last level approval that we tend to get blocked on, even though we have the ability, you know, as SIG node approvers, to bring it all the way to that last step until you guys are able to come in and take a look at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the particular aliases we'll have to review. That's one of the reasons why I'm trying to make this announcement now, so we can take time to actually collect the right changes that need to make in the corresponding organizational repos to get it right. With respect to enhancement approvers, I think, Kevin, if you recall when we wrote that document last year, we threw that out as a with a particular path to getting there. I personally would be very supportive of a few additional individuals having further rights in those enhancement approver directories. That requires some folks to speak up and say they want them, though. So like, maybe the best thing to close on right now is say these are the changes I wanted to announce today, because they set the groundwork for how like the operation of the SIG works for the year. But that doesn't necessarily preclude us from making additional follow-on changes. And if folks have particular things they would like to see, please reach out to me and Dawn. We want to use the new year as a time to scale out. But this was the most immediate tangible thing I wanted to announce today, I guess. But
okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks. Everything sounds great. It's just trying to get some clarity on some of those, I guess, finer points. So
yeah, no problem. And I'm a little worried here. My wife has COVID right now, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh man, am I getting sick as I'm talking about this? But please reach out, Kevin, if there's particular nuances that I might be missing. Yeah, we definitely want to scale out in 2023. And so this is just the first step in trying to help that. So thanks again for all the positive comments in the chat. And thanks, Sergey and all for volunteering. So anyway, all the best, everyone.